Okay, within this video, I'm going to show you how to create a simple drop-down list within your navigation bar. In my previous videos, I showed you how to set up your navigation bar using HTML and CSS. So if you have not viewed that video, go ahead and make sure you look up that video in my YouTube account because it is going to be very helpful, and I'm assuming everybody knows how to set up the basic structure first. So definitely make sure you look at that. Now what I have here, I have a simple navigation bar set up that's going to 4 basic pages here. And let's take a look at it in the browser. Okay. What I have is the 4 links over here on the right hand side, and what I want to do is I want to bring my mouse over one of the links and I want it to drop down so that I can have access to secondary pages. Now, typically when you work with navigation bars, you typically don't want more than 6 or 7 navigational links on your bar, because then it gets a little confusing where to go and so forth. So when you have more pages, then you want to figure out how you can group that together, and one best way to do it is with secondary pages with a drop-down list. So first thing we need to do is we need to identify which uh, navigational link that we want to make into a drop-down list. And simply, we're going to just add a class. And that class, because what's going to happen is we're going to eventually have to format that to fit our color scheme and so forth. And so to identify that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my li tag here for about. I'm going to type in class equals drop a. Again, you can give it anything you want as a name, just don't include spaces on that, because then it just doesn't work on that. You could use an ID, but if you're going to have other drop-down lists, a lot of times you want to apply the same formatting to those other drop-down lists. So that's why I'm going with a class on that. So once we identify that, even if I relaunch this on the page, you're not going to notice a difference because all we're doing is we're giving it a name. Second thing you need to do is we're going to have to go in and create and add another list, what we call a nested list, within the About section that we have here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an unordered list just like we have here. And then we're going to have list items, and the number of list items that you want is going to be the secondary pages that you're going to see in your drop-down list. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy some code over I already have done and completed. And the key here is I want to put it after the closing anchor tag and before the closing li tag for this area that I'm creating the drop-down list. So that becomes part of About. So what I'm doing here is I'm simply putting in this UL. Let me just tab over some of this stuff. So I just indent it in to kind of know that what we're working with. And so what we're doing is we're creating a nested list within this list item. One thing I did differently here is with this new list, I'm going to give it a different class name because I need to format it separately. So when the drop down list, when you bring your mouse over that drop down list that you want and it comes up, you want it to have a certain format. You want it to make sure it stands out and fits your color scheme on that part. So the key here is we're going to give it a class name, just like I was talking about before with IDs. If you're going to apply the same, have another drop-down list, you probably want to have the same style, so that's why I'm using class on that part. So again, this looks just like a regular navigation bar, but you're placing it within the li element. So let me save this and let's launch this. Let's see what it looks like. And you can see you created a nested list right below About. Now the problem here is we don't want to see link 1, link 2, link 3. Now these links are workable because we used the anchor tag. So what we have to do is we have to basically hide that from showing. Hide that from showing, so that way all we see is About, and when we bring our mouse over it, then those 3 links are going to appear. This is where style sheets come into play. So you have to understand and work with CSS. So I have the external style sheet set up over here on the right hand side. Let me just press return a couple times. So I put this up here in the middle, and I'm going to put in some styles here for my drop down styles to help us go in and control the formatting and also the positioning. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to change the positioning of the list item for drop A to be relative. So this is a simple style. We just go in, we say drop A position relative. Now what you're trying to do here is you have to understand with positioning, when you add CSS, you're basically saying, okay, I want to change this and be able to position this a certain way. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to take that secondary page, a secondary nested list, and basically we're going to have it absolutely be positioned within the relative area of the list item. And it gets a little tricky. I'm not going to spend that much time talking about relative versus absolute in this regards, but just remember that your main category that you want to go in and create the drop down list, you want to add position relative. Your secondary list, we're going to go in and add that as position absolute. Now we also want to go in and I want to hide this list from showing. Well, we can do and use CSS to do that, and we'll use display none to basically hide that list. So what I'm going to do here is simply going in, I'm going to change the position to absolute. I'm going to say display none. Now let's take a look at this real quick. I reload, and then all of a sudden that sub list, that nested list, is hidden. So where is it? Well, we have to go in and put in some other controls so when we bring our mouse over about, it shows it. So now it's hidden. Now we got to show it, and we have to use CSS to do that. So first thing I'm going to do some formatting um, uh, of that to help us work with this. And since I'm working with list items within the drop B, so you can go in and add your own type of formatting to change the colors, because sometimes you want the color of the background stand out. You might want to go in and add a border to distinguish between each of the list items. So one of the things I like to do, especially with a drop-down list, I like to go in and add a border to the bottom of the list item. And I also like to change the color. Now you can use a hexadecimal values for changing colors for the background. You can say background hyphen color and do hexadecimals, or you can use the RGBA model, and what I love about that is that you can change the opacity. So what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to go in and I'm going to add a bottom border. That's going to be a solid 1 pixel, so it's going to be below the list item. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the RGBA color model. And what that's going to do is you choose the color you want. And the fourth one, and notice the parameters are separated by commas, because any parameters you have in the parentheses you have separated by a comma. But that fourth unit is indicating opacity. So that way it's going to be a little transparent. You'll see some of the background show through. So again, this is just a form. You can actually add other things in here, such as if you want to change the font face, change the font size, any of the other styles. Now remember, this is going to affect when you bring your mouse over about and that drop down list appears. You're going to see that color and the border and so forth. So you're going to apply the styles there. You can also apply the styles to the anchor tag as well. Now let's create that hover effect. So what we're going to do here is I need to go in and use a child selector to target the new drop down list. And when we do that, we're going to have to display it as a block. We're going to display it as a block. And to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm simply going to, first I'll start off. I'm going to use the Swedo class where I'm going to say drop A hover, because that's what I want. Is I want this list item, when I bring my mouse over it, I want to be able to hover over it and have it do something. And then I'm just going to simply go in, put a greater than sign in, and I'm going to say dot drop B. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the child selector to target that new drop down list, saying, hey, I want, when I bring my mouse over drop A, I want drop B to do something. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the curly braces in. I'm going to say display colon block. Now by doing display colon block, we're basically showing it. So where we said display none, we went in and we hit it. Now we're saying I want to drop B, that new nested list, I want to show it. So let's bring my mouse over here about and notice that you can see, now it's hard, but there's a drop down list and you can see a little border going in between. So it's not really readable. So this is where you have to go in and control the formatting. So one of the things is, the first thing I would do is I would add a background color. A background color to this list called drop B, the UL list. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to simply go in and use the background color up here into the drop B style. I'm going to paste it in, and again it's going to be a certain color that fits your color scheme. So if I come back over and I relaunch this and refresh this, you can see has that background color, makes it easier to read. The other issue you have here is that you can't, what happens is that the width is not large enough for the links, the textual links to stand on one line. So this is a simple correction. You can actually go in and add a simple width option to your drop B. That's your second list. And I'm just going to, this is sometimes where you have to experiment based on the name of your links. But I'm going to go with a width of 200 pixels. I'm going to save it, refresh here, and see now it goes in, it's a little bit larger. And that way it fits the actual text that we have there. Now, the other thing that you want to think about here, because you can do other formatting. Other formatting is, that's the best thing about CSS. You can apply formatting to everything that you want to work with. But when someone looks at this website, how do they know this is a drop-down list unless I bring my mouse over top of it? So one of the things I like to do is I like to go in and add a Unicode character that allows to showcase that there's more options available. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a pseudo element to do this, and I'm going to incorporate a special character that looks like an arrow pointing down. And this is where if you start talking about meta tags and you talk about the Unicode character set where you can actually insert special characters in your page and so forth, that's what we're looking at here. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm simply going to go in and add a new style. I'm going to say dot drop A colon after. Now, for some people, what is after? You're used to seeing this when you work with styles, when you're going in and saying a colon visit, a colon link, a colon hover, and so forth. But after, what does that mean? All it does is basically insert some text after the content of the element that you chose. So in this case, what it's going to do here is it's going to add some content after the drop A element, which would be your list item. Now, what do we want to add in there? Well, I'm going to go in. First thing I want to do is I want to put that special character in. And to do so, I'm going to use a special style rule called content. Then in quotation marks, I'm putting in the Unicode character. That's going to be the arrow pointing down. Because it's text, I need to control the font size of this. So I'm going to go in with font size, and again, depending on the character itself and what you have here, you have to remember that the position and the size of the navigation bar is really small, so you don't want something too large there. And we can go back and experiment here in just a second. And secondly, because I'm working with text, I want to turn on the option called display block for this. And what that does is basically it's going to take this inline text and make it into a block element. And now when you do that, you're able to control the positioning. You're able to add borders, padding if you want to, and you're basically going in and controlling it better. So right now it's simply text. It's an inline element. So let me save this. Let's see what it looks like right now. All it does is you see that little arrow pointing down up here at the top. Well, I don't want it down here. I want to position over here to the right of the text. I don't want it here. I want it over here on the right of the text. So because I went in and used the change this display block, I can now go into the style and use the positioning apps, the styles that we have here. So here I'm going to say position, absolute, and then once I do that, I can then use the styling for top, left, right and position it. So I have to put this in before I can type in, for example, top. Now you could work with pixels in this case. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I'm going to go in and just use percents at this time. And what I'm going to say is I want to, from the top of the list item, I want that character to start at 38% from the top. And on the right side, 12%. Again, you could not use top or right without having position absolute or position relative selected here. I'm going to save this and I want you to watch what happens when I refresh here. Notice it moves the arrow over here, so it's now on the right side of about because we changed the right positioning and we also told it from the top. So that was a nice little option there, and that's really it really enhances the navigation bar to know that there's a drop down list there. So if you're going to add a drop down list, make sure you add that Unicode character because it's going to help viewers know that there is something there on that part. Now just so you can see it, I'm going to increase the font size here from 0.5 to 2M. Because you got to remember, this Unicode character is not an object, it's not a graphic, it's actually text. And so let's go ahead and save this and refresh. See how that arrow becomes larger? Now that positioning comes off because of the size of the arrow. So you have to find the right size before you go in and start working with positioning, because then if you don't, then you decide to go and change the size, then the position will be off again. So you have to adjust that accordingly. So this is a Unicode character. This is not a graphic. It's a piece of text. So this goes in, and I'm just wanting to show you how that's done. Again, I'll just undo that to 0.5M. Again, it depends on the size. Usually I find 0.5M to be about the right size. You're not going to go too higher than that on that because it's just too large for that. So hopefully that helps you out, and if you have any questions, let me know.